So Edmund Burke said the only thing necessary for evil to triumph in the world is that good men do nothing. Ironically, he was Irish, which Ireland is a very neutral country. But throughout this war in Ukraine, Ireland has increased its vocal support of Ukraine and also expressed an interest of providing medical support to include Swiss-made ambulance vehicles. But that brings me to Switzerland. Switzerland is now being looked down upon in the world community as a pathetic clown country that sits behind its borders, buried deep in the Alps, surrounded by peaceful allies, selling defense items to countries, but not participating in the common security advancement of the West. Make no mistake, Switzerland is a Western nation through and through in all manners of culture, politics, and economics. They are integrated as a Western nation. But they refuse to participate in that system's, the Western collective security. They provide defensive systems, but refuse to actively participate by allowing them to go to war, apparently. And you know what I call that? Cowardice. It's cowardice both in conviction and in practice. For instance, Switzerland won't let Spain transfer the Toledo anti-aircraft systems, both the missiles and the artillery, with the Aspide missiles and the 35mm barrel sets, to Ukraine. The approval is required because the system contains many Swiss-made components. Switzerland is also vetoing the re-export of Swiss-made tank ammunition that Berlin wants to send to Ukraine so its anti-tank aircraft can be resupplied with that ammo. These were already provided by Germany. Switzerland warned that any country that failed to assist or failed to abide by their rules cannot be viewed as a reliable partner. This behavior also harms Switzerland itself in the long term, meaning if you give weapons to a country that is actively at war, despite who their enemy is, then you are not a reliable partner to Switzerland. So Switzerland, you're so neutral that not only are you giving your weapons to places like Qatar, that's a whole nother thing, so they can have them for the World Cup, assuming they'll never use them in warfare, but you almost start to wonder, what the fuck are these weapons for? It's you're making weapons in the hopes that they never go to war because it's an economic driver for you. I mean, Russia is firing ballistic missiles at civilian apartment houses. They're killing civilians, but you are neutral to that, standing strongly behind your neutrality. You don't. It's not really taking a side here. It's pretty easy to see that your sides are rockets versus children, and you're just trying to stay neutral between rockets and children. We're just right here in the middle. It's disgusting. So fuck you and your warning to the rest of the countries. You are profiting from this war. Global orders of NATO standard equipment from Switzerland are at an all-time high. Over the past 10 years, Germany bought military goods from Switzerland to the tune of $1.5 trillion. That was 23% of all Swiss exports during that 10-year period. Now Germany can't do anything with them against an absolute foe, which is Russia. And that has always been our foe. We have China on the other side, but we have always had NATO, and you have always made NATO standard equipment with the understanding that it was going to be provided in a potential fight against Russia. And here we are. Germany responded that if re-exports are impossible in cases like this, I don't think we can get any more armaments from Switzerland in the future. And that is what I hope happens. I hope Swiss weapons exports dry up and they die on their neutral hill due to living outside the norms and values of its international partners. You don't get to make weapons, sell them to other countries, and then when those countries who order those weapons tell you clearly this is for a fight against Russia, then tell them, no, you don't get to use them because for whatever reason. You want to maintain trade relations with Russia, whatever the reason is, it's outside of the international norms and order that we have established and that we have integrated you into. So if this is the case, we have no problem ejecting you from that order. That is not something Switzerland wants. It relies on its banking and weapons exports for its economy, period. And if the Western countries, to include the United States, who doesn't rely on Swiss weapons per se, but if Western nations look at Switzerland and go, they're not reliable, we'll look to the U.S. for this. The U.S. is more than happy to provide this stuff. They have been. Because the reality is, there is no neutrality. And I don't think there's a lower expectation I have for a country outside of probably Hungary than what I see in Switzerland. And Switzerland was actually my favorite European country. I've been to Davos and Lucerne, and it's beautiful there, but my view of them are tarnished. And like I said, there is no neutrality. You can either be with Ukraine or with Russia. This so-called neutrality always supports the aggressor, because when you do nothing, the aggressor is allowed to continue, especially when that aggressor is more powerful, on paper anyways, in the case of Russia. This war will only end when Russia is defeated, and you're complicit in holding Ukraine back from winning the righteous fight. So what will it take you, Switzerland? What will it take Olaf Schulz or Hungary, or hell, even the United States to provide the equipment that's necessary? Is it images of that dead woman's manicured hand in Bucha? Is it bodies of people who were queuing for bread in Chernihiv? I mean, was it a stuffed toy at the crematorium station that was covered in blood? I mean, there was a 4-year-old girl killed in a purple dress in Vinestia. These are all things that we've seen. Or now, the gut-wrenching screams from under the rubble of an apartment building in Dnipro where dozens and dozens of people were killed by Russians. And don't get me started on Germany, where the perpetually soft-penised Olaf Scholz won't allow Poland or Finland to send Leopard 2 main battle tanks to Ukraine unless the United States is willing to provide Ukraine with M1 Abrams tanks. Well, the U.S. is sending tanks to Poland, so we'll see where that goes. But what kind of fucking new policy is that? Like, to be a graduate student in 30 years, I mean, look back, because I wrote my master's thesis on Chinese Taiwan policy. So someone inevitably is going to analyze Russia, Ukraine. To look back and say and try to understand what Germany's policy during this war was, where it seems like the flavor of the day rules Schulz, so he doesn't seem irrational to Putin. At worst, it looks like you're quaking in your boots behind the U.S. and Britain and France and Poland. But that brings me to the U.S., who is the biggest supporter of Ukraine. However, with the UK giving Challenger tanks and Apache helicopters, it's time for the US to cut the shit. We were never the ones to be outdone by the Brits. Yes, we are giving Bradleys, and those are going to be so effective, and that's great. But our lack of killing blow support is providing sanctuary for Russian systems that are now killing Ukrainian citizens. We've seen that. It's not just military targets. These are Ukrainians dying. And this is being driven by our unwillingness to provide the weapons that have the capability to go beyond what we are giving them. Instead of Gimlers, which only can go 90 kilometers, give them ATACMS, which can go 300 kilometers. Give them Grey Eagle drones. Give them more small diameter bombs that will deny Russia the ability to set up shop and stay comfortable where they're at. And then finally, give them the aircraft they need and Abrams, which will provide them the means to destroy Russia in Ukraine. All of this comes at relatively little expense in our massive, massive defense budget, we build this defense budget solely on the purpose of defeating Russia and China. And if we can get Russia back to its borders, weakened and defeated without a single U.S. soldier lost, I feel like $100 or $200 billion in military aid coming from the United States' own defense budget that we had already set up, giving them equipment that we're not necessarily using, is just a massively good investment. So it's time for countries like Switzerland and Germany to cut the shit. Specifically Switzerland. Germany's been helping out as well. But if you're going to make weapons and sell them to others, you need to understand that those weapons are going to be used in war against an enemy. It's complete bullshit that you're holding them back when you know, and your leaders have said, that what Russia is doing is probably a war crime and absolutely evil. And then it's time for the U.S. just to finally say, we're not scared of Russia, and we're not, and give them what they need to go back to the previous borders, take Crimea, and end this fucking war once and for all.